we have also Paloma Farieres, the Comisión Española de Ayuda al Refugiado. So we will start immediately asking Mr. Lopez Aguilar his general views about the two migration package that the Commission present during the COVID crisis, September 2020 and beginning of June this year. What is your first impression about all these new measures announced by the Commission and where we are now at the level of the European Parliament?
Well, first of all, good afternoon to you all. It's my pleasure and my privilege to be of some service to the European Federalists and to do it in my capacity, member of the European Parliament as chair of the LIBE Committee, of the Committee of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. For one thing, let me tell you, I'm a federalist myself, but I am happy to exchange views with federalist-minded European citizens, platforms, think tanks, professors, universities, activists, and members of the European family, one way or the other, in an issue which is a core subject matter of the competence of the committee I have the honor to chair. But let me add immediately that the issues with which my committee deals with are divisive issues. Yes, of course, they, in my view, call for a federalist approach, but regrettably so, they have been subject, on the contrary, to an increasing wave of anti-European trends, because they are divisive between those who do believe in the European approach and those who oppose the European approach and the European Union to begin with. Migration and asylum is an example. It's not the only example. It also is the case of judicial cooperation in criminal matters, criminal law making, procedural guarantees ruled by European law, fundamental rights themselves. But it is certainly the case of migration and asylum. They are divisive issues. I have been here in the European Parliament for the last 10 years, and I have fought all the way, every minute, against an increasing tide of negative sight to both migration and asylum. This increasing tide has been in time coincidence with the effectiveness and the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty and the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which have made the European liberty, justice and security area the ultimate expression of the political dimension of the European Union. And more than that, it has created the legal basis for both migration policy making and lawmaking and asylum policy making and lawmaking at a European scale. And you know what? We've done it. We have delivered. In my capacity as chair of the LIBE Committee, we have actually put in place a migration package consisting of nothing less than 8 pieces of legislation, European legislation, which is effective by now, in force by now, and an asylum package consisting of nothing less than 9 pieces of legislation, which is effective and in force by now. But throughout this period of time in which the Lisbon Treaty has been in force, along with the Charter of Fundamental Rights, we have seen 2 major troubles growing bigger and bigger, and thus imposing a concern to our House, the European Parliament, and particularly to the LIBE Committee as the lawmaking body on the matter. Those major troubles can be summarized as, first, lack of solidarity, thus a denial of the core mandate, grounding pillar of the whole area of liberty, justice, and security when it comes to migration and asylum policy and lawmaking, which is binding solidarity and shared responsibility. Those are the founding pillars of the whole European asylum system. Article 80 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union. And the second major trouble, thus posing a concern to the works of our committee, lack of compliance with European law in all. So an increasing number of flagrant violations, blatant violations of European law. We have seen that, of course, in the notorious case of some usual suspects, the so-called Visegrad group, but not the only case. When it came, for instance, to the relocation decisions that were made by the Council, which were meant to be binding by for the member states, we saw that most member states refused to be part of the so-called solidarity mechanism by relocation throughout the so-called refugee crisis, with a peak in 2015. That is why we have made a case of righting the wrong, mending those failures, those breaches of the European Common Asylum System as it stands by now. Most importantly, tackling the most controversial element of the whole system, which is a piece of legislation included in the asylum package by the name of Dublin Regulation, which is the regulation which allocates the responsibility to handle the asylum requests and to grant the protection thereby to the country, to the member state of first entry, having as a consequence a very unfair distribution of responsibilities among the member states, namely overloading those member states with an external border of the European Union, particularly leaning to the Mediterranean and later on to the Atlantic, again the Canary Islands, which are not in the Mediterranean, are European Union in the Atlantic, in the nearby the northwestern coast of Africa. So in order to mend those failures and lack of accomplishment of the migration as a package as it is by now, an asylum package as it is by now, we asked for the Commission, from the Commission to take action and take initiative. And actually, in the debate of investiture of the president-to-be Ursula von der Leyen, she made a commitment to come up with a so-called new pact on asylum and migration in order precisely to meet the challenges that have been posed by these major troubles, major concerns that I have just summarized. And she did. Accordingly, Home Commissioner Ylva Johansson announced that she would be presenting a so-called new pact on migration and asylum by the end of 2019. Of course, the whole thing was postponed because of the pandemic, which put all the European legislative process in a halt for some while. But eventually she did. In September 2020, she came with a new text of proposals, new package of proposals, under the name and the label of New Pact on Migration and Asylum, consisting in this particular occasion of 5 pieces of legislation, all of them regulations. And you know that a regulation is binding law for the member states, directly effective, no need of transposition, and creating obligations for the member states, which are subject to claims by the European citizens before all courts of justice, all the way to the European Court of Justice. 5 pieces of legislation, according to a so-called package approach, because these pieces of legislation happen to be narrowly intertwined between each other. First, the major piece of legislation is a newly called Regulation on Asylum and Migration Management, the so-called RAM, which is the heaviest component element of the chain. Second, a so-called screening regulation, in order to impose a thorough examination of who is who when entering the external borders of the European Union. Third, linked to this, a new Eurodac regulation, which is fingerprinting and biometric identification of every subject entering the external borders of the European Union, interoperable between all of the member states with intelligence systems handled by the so-called EU-LISA, large-scale data, big data agency of the European Union, competent precisely on this field of action. Fourth, a new asylum procedures regulation, granting homogeneous standards which are binding and applicable for all the member states as to how to proceed to handle the requests for asylum. And fifth, but no less importance, on the contrary, the so-called crisis regulation, of which I am responsible as rapporteur, which is the only chance that solidarity has in this new package, in this new so-called Migration and Asylum Pact, the new Migration and Asylum Pact. Well, my assessment is this, and it's the assessment that has been expressed by the pro-European majority, which is breathing within the LIBE committee with increasing difficulties, insofar as the anti-European seats have also been on the rise for the last 10 years in the European Parliament. So having significant impact in the European legislative procedure and lawmaking process in all, including the political debate when it comes to migration and asylum issues as divisive issues. My assessment is, it won't be a pact until the European Parliament makes it so. It is not a pact yet. For it to be a pact, it has to be agreed with the European Parliament, because we are lawmaking body here. The European Parliament, ever since the Lisbon Treaty entered into force, is more legislative power of the European Union than never before. To begin with, it is legislative in the ordinary legislative procedure on equal footing with the Council. So it takes the Council, yes, qualified majority in the Council to get the legislation finally adopted and entered into force. But it takes also the European Parliament. And without the European Parliament, there is no chance for the European legislation to enter into force. So without us, it won't be a pact. And second, it is for sure that the European Parliament will do its best, and I will do my best, not only as chair, but also expressing the views of the majority of the LIBE committee, but also as rapporteur of one of the component elements, which is of relevance, to fill with some content the principle of binding solidarity and shared responsibility. The European Parliament will do its best, and I will do my best to increase, to higher the standard that has been set by the Commission with its proposal. Because in my view, let's make it clear, the Commission has lowered the standard way too low, precisely to meet the kind of quarrel which is to be expected from the Council, precisely to meet the difficulties within the Council to make up its mind, to come up with some common denominator. It is only obvious that migration and asylum has become such a divisive issue and subject to such a hard to overcome sum of contradictions, prejudices, even fake news, misunderstandings about the whole thing, that in order to make the proposal acceptable at the starting point of the procedure for the Council, the Commission has lowered the standard beyond reason, beyond compare, trying to seek out for the so-called lowest common denominator, the Commission has simply gone much too low. It needs to be higher, this standard. It needs to be enhanced, the level of political impetus, so we can provide a response which, in my view, has to meet three standards. First, it has to be consistent with the European values, not in denial of European values, European principles, and European law, for one thing, because we have seen for all too long, we have seen violations of European law, contempt of European law. More than that, an increasing number of states which do not give a damn about infringement procedures or even the rulings of the European Court of Justice in the matter, which is an unprecedented kind of existential crisis for the policy and lawmaking in this field of action. Second standard that it has to be met. Not only it has to be consistent with European values, principles, and European law, it has to be European. Because it's a complete misunderstanding to think that this issue can be handled not only at an individual level by the member states, but also by some kind of panic state of mind in which the states mistrust each other and deny each other the kind of help and solidarity that it takes to go European in an issue which is truly European. I have made the case in many occasions, but let me just finger point a very illustrative example. I happen to be born in the Canaries. I happen to be resident in the Canaries. I happen to have been a member of the Spanish Parliament representing the Canary Islands constituency. I'm a Spaniard, and I'm a European. I'm a proud European. But the point I'm making is that the Canaries is as European Union as Brussels or Strasbourg. So we have to fight the misunderstanding that you can keep people fleeing from despair or from persecution, people fleeing from conflict or imminent risks in the Canary Islands, pretending that insofar as they are kept in the Canary Islands, they have not made it to the European Union yet. Because once they set foot in the Canaries, they are already in the European Union, and they're asking for a European response. And that response can only go European, can only be European in its nature, in its content, in its scope. It takes a European response. We cannot go any longer with this desperate run leading nowhere, through which we have seen Greece, Cyprus, Malta, Italy, and Spain claiming that they have been left on their own, with everyone else turning a blind eye on them, when they are in trouble with a migration pressure or with an asylum abrupt sequence of requests coming from a certain neighboring region of conflict, which might be the case of Greece vis-a-vis Middle East, or the Canaries or Ceuta and Melilla vis-a-vis the African continent. And finally, it has to be effective. It makes no sense that we keep any longer this kind of game in which we play with words, we play tricks with legal concepts and technicalities, extremely hard to understand for any other who is not familiar with extreme sophistication of European jargon, but actually makes no difference when it comes to handling facts and making something out of them. And my final point is that it's only I do share that we got to change the narrative. The predominant narrative, I insist, has been a narrative in denial, what I call a negationist narrative. The negationist narrative in this regard goes like this. The predominant understanding of the European Union, which is a misunderstanding actually, would be, we wish migration did not exist. We would like a world in which migration did not exist, which is absurd and preposterous. Migration has always existed. It'll always exist. That's the nature of humankind. That's the nature of mankind. We have always been on the move. Second, once it exists, our first choice is to keep them afar from our sight. Absurd. That cannot work. It's not only in denial of our values and our law, it is ineffective and subject to multiple criticism. And finally, if they cannot be kept afar from our side, at least let's return them one way or the other, even if we have to buy the political will of non-existent governments or non-existent countries, as Libya, which is a non-existent government, absolutely ineffective to prevent the violation of rights. That is the point that I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Many thanks for your very strong message. And let me underline that in the 2019, before the European election, the Federalists drafted manifesto with very concrete elements that they are very shared views concerning the necessity to have a very strong and sustainable migration policy, including issues, very specific issues, as it is the need to have legal entry for people looking for protection. I know, Mr. Aguilar, you work a lot on humanitarian visas in the European Parliament. There is nothing concrete on this. There is also very specific charter, European Charter of Fundamental Rights obligation concerning prohibition of pushback. So it's a very clear, the legal framework at the EU and the obligation. But I would like to let the floor to Regina. She has a long experience, in particular on search and rescue in the Mediterranean, and the pushback is one of the elements announced already in the September 2020 package. As the Commission asked FRA to work on a kind of guiding documents on pushback. And I would like first to share the experience, if there is a progress now on this, and what could be some, let's say, progress, some concrete progress we can expect, having in mind the current dramatic situation. It's not only the sea border, it's also land borders in the Balkans. The pushback, we don't have to banalize the phenomenon of pushback. Please, Regina, you have the floor. Try to make your presentation, let's say, less than 10 minutes, so we will have a second round if possible.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And thank you to have me here today. You started with a very tough question, the pushback. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you, Mr. Lopez, for everything that you say. It was very honest and realistic. And I'm positive that your presence in the Libe will help all of us to move towards a solution, concrete solution. MOAS is the first search and rescue organization that work in the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea. So we created this organization just because we want to fulfill the gap. In 2014, there was only the mission Mare Nostrum, that was an Italian military mission that was trying to contrast the smuggling chain, but also to saving lives. very different from the Frontex mission that succeed, the different missions. About pushback, it's very horrific, the situation that is happening at the borders. Of course, the most covered one by the media is the sea border. But also we saw in the last month some media also on the Balkans routes. First of all, I will say that to continue to have agreement with this type of, as Mr. Lopez say, parties like Libyan and sometimes also with Turkey. I feel like if Europe has lost their ethical and moral value, because all of us, we know how the people are treated when after being captured by the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, they are taken in lager. They are called detention center, but this is not really what happened. All the INGO, United Nations, condemned the situation there. So we are, all of us are very well informed that the situation is horrific. I'm bear witness many stories of people that we rescue since 2014. MOAS was active and rescued more than 40,000 people, women, children, grandmother, doctor, nurses, all type of nationality, many refugees from Syria, but also from Senegal, from Ethiopia, Eritrea, many nationality. And definitely there need to be a coordination, of course, with all actors out at sea, but also inland, so full sharing information. However, it's not possible to tolerate the continue situation on pushback that is happening, and that the country that continue to do this pushback are not guilty. They are not regulated, you know, because this situation is creating a lot of precedents. Europe cannot ignore the responsibility towards the people who are risking their lives, and only fixing, only arranging our policy, European policy in border control or border protection without implementing concrete safe and legal routes, as could be humanitarian visa, sponsorship, family reunification, study visa for studies, and etc. All these it's awful. Also, we discussed before the Dublin 3, and that is quite interesting because we have trying, it's quite obsolete, because we all of us know that the people that arrive in European border, at the European shore, probably they are not going to, they don't want to stay, because probably they try to take the legal path of the family reunification, but this didn't happen. So they cannot ask their request of asylum in the country, in the first country in which they arrive. So I'm really propositive and positive on this, in what Mr. Lopez say, and I hope that we will consider a more technological and more modern way to approach this point. Of course, the dealing with migration only focusing on proximity, so as the people are crossing from Africa through Europe, and of course the most near country are Italy, Malta, Spain, and Greece, and Cyprus. All of us, I'm Italian, but I live in Malta, have been felt the weight of this migration. So a fair share on resettlement for sure, faster resettlement for sure will give more hope to the countries that are now crashing under this weight. Also, I just wanted to say that we lost one European member, a founder member of Europe, was the United Kingdom. And one of, mostly we lost it for two reasons, the financial reason and the migration. So I'm sure that unless we trying to be more proactive together, sharing the people that arrive on European shore, we are at risk to lose our beloved European Union.
Many thanks, Regina. It's extremely rich, your contribution to the debate, to the discussion, and it's really important to refer to your own experience, to share with us your own experience during all this long period, because from Lampedusa crisis to today, it's a huge effort, a lot of piece of legislation present, and the results are extremely limited. So we have to revise the whole policy approach. So I would like to give the floor to Apostolos now to share with us his experience on the hotspot and his views concerning, and his views also concerning this screening, the fast-track screening process. So Apostolos, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you for the invitation. I think, of course, it's more difficult after the two first speakers to present other stuff, but at least they did a difficult job and they entered on the political side. Now, yesterday, we all of us had the International World Day for the Refugees, and the question is, how many refugees are arriving in Europe? Out of 82 million people that are on the move, how many of them are reaching Europe? And I'm afraid that in a few years from now, with the restriction of European Union towards refugees, the number of people, it will be less and less. So then we don't have to discuss anymore about the refugees. Secondly, I would like to bring a question, how much resources we are being spending on unnecessary measures or measures that are not working versus spending of the money on resources that would be beneficial for Europe itself, but first of all, for the people who are in need. The picture that you are seeing in front of you at the moment is the first day of inauguration of the hotspot, when the commissioner at the time, Mr. Avramopoulos, had the inauguration of the hotspot in Moria as one of the best solutions in Europe that time. So that picture remained as a symbol of the welcoming of the people in European territories. Through my experience in the previous years, before arriving in the 2015 so-called refugee crisis, we could be identifying the following symptoms of European policies. The time detention as deterrence was number one, implementation, poor reception conditions as a deterrence, externalization of border control and containment. The time was the time of Libya and also discussion with Turkey. The closure of borders, we would see the building up of the first fences around. Introduction of the voluntary return policy with active forced policies. The pushbacks and including of the movement of people back to third countries as readmission agreements. All these restrictive policies have consequences that we've been seeing on the medical side on impact on the physical, mental health and well-being of people, and definitely the correlation between substandard living condition and diseases for those people. At the same time, if you read, because that probably the symptoms that I just prescribed was maybe from the NGO point of view, but if we come to the FRA analysis about migration to European Union, the 5 persistent challenges and fundamental rights concerns, we're talking about strict border management, inadequate living conditions in reception centers, restrictive asylum procedures, living unaccompanied children vulnerable, and immigration detention as one of the 5 concerns for the migration to Europe. Following the so-called refugee crisis, we saw another European innovative approach. That was the approach of the hotspots with the EU-Turkey statement, defining having the Greek islands of Lesbos, Samos, Chios, Kos, and Leros as the hotspots of Europe, where people are contained until today. And of course, that's with the red dots. And with the blue dots, we see the 30 more camps that were created after the closure of so-called Balkan routes, where people still remain on those locations. So if we want to consider that how these people, because that's a big discussion about refugees and migrants, the WHO report on European region, it talks about people who are healthy and becoming sick because of poor living conditions, inadequate food and water, increased stress, and lack of integration. And they're not talking about an African or other continents. They talk about European continent on that. So as we are in the middle of a COVID pandemic, that's how a refugee camp looks like. And that's how people today in Europe go into a supermarket to prevent COVID by themselves. So this is the beauty of the European citizen funds money for setting up camps, be that old Moria 1 or Moria 2, be that in Samos or be that in Chios. So those are the camps that Europe is proud of. And as the president of European Commission was saying that each human being has a solemn dignity, that's the dignity of those citizens in European territory. At the same time, when the commissioners following the fires in Moria on the 17th of September were saying no more Morias, in a few days after we saw Moria 2 being built with the EU funding. And of course, talking about 2021, that Moria 2 will be still in place. And then, of course, we were happy to hear about the new pact on migration and asylum that was presented. But before we analyze a little bit the pact and the impact of that, we'll see what is happening in reality. So how this new pact on asylum and migration is being presented, where we see the closing of borders, and that's the new picture from Evros land borders between Greece and Turkey. When we see the pushbacks, while the president of European Commission was talking about saving lives at sea, it's not optional. But here we see the kidnapping of people on the islands and sending them back into Turkey with this orange, beautiful thingy. The same time, where all the world is celebrating the 20th of June, the World Refugee Day, the Greek government decides to bring a law how to push to send people back. And how also to make more restriction for their asylum process. At the same time, while Europe have been proud to talk about integration, we see camps on the mainland not disappearing, but we see walls, and we want these people to be invisible for the rest and remaining locked on those camps. At the same time, while we talk about welcoming people, new camps prisons are being built up, and this is a new camp in Samos, who is going to be operating soon. These are called closed control centers, where people need to be locked down because they have to stay there for their own application. At the same time, we see the unaccompanied minors, who have been one of the concerns, and thousands of children have been lost in Europe, where we see today more than 3,500 children that are unaccompanied in Greece, and majority of them are in unsafe places, living in the Greek territory. So that's about the dignity and the saving lives of those people in the hotspots. And of course, here, let me touch a few things regarding the pact. It's new. Was presented as a fresh start, but in reality, it's just a continuation and intensification of containment and deterrence policy, because it does not address any fundamental issues related to protection and dignified reception of people. It does not increase safe and legal pathways to Europe. When I hear from different European leaders who are visiting Greece the last days, they talk about those people arriving illegally in Europe. Unfortunately, when you are a person who are seeking for protection, I don't think you don't have much of the ways to find your legal path. And especially if today, because of COVID, we can make restriction of movements, when you are having a push factor, that is the war in your back and back of your family, there are not much of a legal and safe pathways to Europe. So that you have to make it the irregular way. At the same time, does not include a clear program to proactively save lives of people at sea with concrete measures. even though there's just wording on that. So for me, I think if we don't stop the containment camps on the borders of Europe, if we do not abandon people at sea, if we don't have deals with unsafe states, and you probably know that recently Greece also declared Turkey as a safe country, where a majority of the asylum seekers in Greece are coming from Syria, from Afghanistan, Somalia, and Pakistan will not be anymore looked in Greece, but they have to be sent back to Turkey. And we know very well what is the safety being in Turkey. At the same time, I think if we want to believe on the fine words about the fresh start, we need to see a radical change. And this radical change, with what being implemented and being approved by European Commission so far, we don't see that part. And of course, there's a very nice word when the European Commission is saying that Greece or Italy or these countries are sovereign countries, so they cannot impose different issues in those countries. But meanwhile, they are approving the different policies that are being taking place on that ground. At the same time, if we want to talk about the health of people, because now we're talking a lot about the COVID-19, the right to health means leaving no one behind, and refugees and migrant health should not be considered separate from the overall health of the population. And I think both on protection issues or health issues, if we don't want to leave no one behind without a real action, which will be the last slogan. So to be honest with you, following migration for at least the last 15 years, I see a lot of slogans without real action and concrete of that, at least on the political level. Of course, that said, not everything is black. There are of course, a lot of gray areas and a lot of effort being taking place. But if we want to really change the reality, I think we need to come out and have a real action on that. And of course, to avoid keeping closing eyes in front of the situation that we are seeing, that in reality, it's not a refugee crisis, it's a policy management crisis. And I think it's easy to close your eyes or to close your ears about the people who are losing their life or people who are suffering at the borders. And I think and the point of view, and I close here by saying that the refugee crisis is not about refugees. It's about us. And I think if we want to change that part, I think it's in our hands. And I think Europe has today the resources, and it needs just the political will in order to make that change. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Apostole, with this really a very strong presentation and covering different issues, different areas of the migration problem. So I would like to give the floor to Paloma now and probably focus on the issue of integration. Do we have the legal framework we need in order to have a strong integration policy? As a federalist, we are proposing now changes. We would like to have changes in the treaties in order to have more solid legal basis, in particular concerning the integration. So I would like to ask you, if it's possible, what do you think concerning this sensitive issue of integration of migrants in Europe? How we can manage to preserve the values, preserve the needs of the person, to protect them, and to ensure also that by speeding up the integration process, we also are in line with our economic interest of Europe in particular on certain specific policy areas and sectors. Paloma, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for invitation. Well, there are many questions and all of them are very interesting. First of all, let me say that for us, the text proposed by the Commission, the pact, is even a bleaker picture for international protection. I have to say that the majority of persons that we are in church in FAIR. So we are not very optimist, and we are really concerned about the next regulation of the pact. You are talking about integration, but for us there is not integration if you have not a legal status. So let's start for the legal status at the European Union in most of the country. Well, we are living in Spain. We are external borders, as of course you already know. And we have to deal with many questions. I think that is very interesting. It starts with the declaration of Med5, no? Even the governments of the Med5, they have they have serious problems with the text. And I think that this, when we are talking about integration, I think that this kind of a statement, they have a very impact in the integration. Let's explain. Juan Fernando talked before about the change of narrative, and I think it's so important. Perhaps because we are external borders, we know that especially the crisis in Canarias in 2018 and also 2020 and also 2021. We have some problems, not only in Canary Island, that most of the people, they show many solidarity, but even in the mainland. So that means that when the civil society in Spain, we call for regulation for legal status, migrants, asylum seekers, it doesn't matter, both of them, in order to give the first step for integration. The principal message from the Spanish authority is we cannot work about that before establish the legal status, but we receive a lot of people from external borders, so we have to be in charge of that. And of course, the member states doesn't allow the regulation in Europe doesn't allow to make, for example, a process of regularization. So that means that people can get integration if they are not first a legal status. I have to say that Apostolo said that the impact of the COVID, it has been very hard in Spain, because most of the people, most of us asylum seekers receive a negative answer, 995 receive a negative answer, and we receive many persons from boat, and of course we receive many persons by flight, but for COVID they stopped coming, but the economical situation, well, it do that many people stay without any work, and of course they lost legal status, or they are not have the possibility to get legal status. So that means that integration will not be possible if we don't apply from the authority process in order to obtain the resident permit. So I have to say that we are in a very if you don't want to leave nobody without the social system. No? I think that we have a very strong social system in Europe, but it's important taking account that many people came to Europe, that they can't be sent out of Europe. I have to say that it's important because now the new border procedure, for example, they consider that most of the people who arrive to European Union, they have not protection needs, but that's not true. So what we'll do with them when they will be refused, that they can be sent to any place. So there is not integration if there is not a legal status. So we are fighting many civil organizations in Spain at this moment in order to get a special, procedure in order to avoid that people could be in an illegal situation, and of course there will not be integration with the illegal situation. Well, we have to be optimistic about the news about the pact of integration, etc. But I have to say that at this moment for us that priority is 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 to obtain a new regulation for thousands of people who have not the option at this moment. So I think that well, I repeat that the COVID make a lot of produce a lot of problems now at the migrant persons in Spain. Also, we receive thousands of people from Canary Island, and of course we have at this moment, well, a very terrible situation in Ceuta with minors at this moment that they are living in, well, in a special. It's not a house, no, it's like a place like Mori, I have to say, for 1 month. So let's see. I can't be very optimistic about that, and we are really, really concerned about the situation. And of course, like Juan Fernando told yesterday, because lack of solidarity and shared responsibility for member states.
Many thanks, Paloma, because you raised really the key issue for integration, the legal status, and you identify also gaps in the return process. And so a quick return of people is not a solution. And the screening process has to ensure minimum fundamental right guarantees, safeguards for the people concerned, including the right to an effective remedy in case of negative decision. This cannot be in hours. This has to be really effective implemented, and it's not a theoretical problem, it's a very practical problem. And this is the key issue for European values. You can discuss about values for hours, but if the people, they don't have the right, the minimum right when they need it, and to have protection, legal support, interpretation, the basic things when they arrive, and to have a minimum legal status clearly indicated. So all this is really theoretical. Let me just come back to Regina. She would like to share with us a video. Regina, please, you can, yes, perfect. It's a very short, yes.
Yes, it's a very short video.
MOAS Italia è un'organizzazione umanitaria internazionale fondata per aiutare le persone più vulnerabili. Dal 2017 portiamo assistenza ai rifugiati Rohingya che vivono nei campi profughi in Bangladesh dopo essere stati costretti a fuggire dal Myanmar. In Yemen e in Somalia consegniamo aiuti nutrizionali per i bambini che soffrono di malnutrizione acuta e medicine salvavita. Nessuno dovrebbe rischiare la propria vita alla ricerca della salvezza. Per questo abbiamo bisogno del tuo aiuto. Tu puoi fare la differenza. Aiutaci ad aiutare.
I just wanted to share this small video, Daphne, with everybody here and the colleagues. This was a fundraising video, but I didn't have anything ready. I think it's very important that today we are here discussing the paramount topic of safe and legal routes, because as we see some images of the rescue, all those people when we were discussing and when they were were scrutinized at the port from the colleagues of IOM, UNHCR and others, most of them, they could have come with humanitarian visa, with family reunification visa. So this is a paramount for sure. That will also be a proactive step to destroy the chain of human smuggling, the traffickers. So I think that I hope that with this meeting and with many other intervention by the political parties, because at the end of the day, MOAS is an NGO, as my colleague of Intersos Apostolus. So we are here to help. We are here to be the voice of the people that are in need and to mitigate sufferance. But at the end of the day, is Europe, the European states, and they need to implement law that allow these people through sponsorship and other safe and legal routes to come in Europe legally without putting their lives in the hands of the smugglers, because there is no other way possible. And trying to have humanitarian corridors for all the people now that are stuck in Libya and returned to Libya, and trying to clearly say no to pushback, no to pushback, no. When a drone, I mean, I'm talking about drones because with MOAS, we were the first NGO that used a drone in SAR, in search and rescue, out at sea. And of course, when we were using drones, we stopped to our mission in the Mediterranean Sea in 2017, after we signed the codice of the NGO, the code of conduct of the NGO, because through our images, when the Italian Coast Guard, the Italian Coordination Center, will share these images with the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, we could be part of an indirect pushback. I don't know if you get it. It's very important to be conscious. So absolutely, I am pro the usage of the drones and technology. We are in 2021, so it's paramount that we use the technology, but not to create an European technology vortex, you know? We need to help, we need to use the technology at the service of the most vulnerable people, not vice versa.
You raise really a key issue also announced in the new package presented by the Commission in June, the use of all this interoperability system and the technology, artificial intelligence, in relation also with the possibility to outsource of a part of the problem. That complicates the whole issue. These are new elements that they have to be assessed in order to readapt the legal framework in such a way that we will have a very strong safeguards for the protection of people. That's the key issue. Before giving the floor, I would like to give you the floor for a few minutes, really very short intervention concerning the global situation. We are in the post area of global compact on migration. There is nothing new, although the COVID crisis accelerate probably the problems or create additional problem, give a different dimension to the problem. I would like in 1 minute your first reaction concerning what can be at the European level, and for us as federalists, the key elements for a global action now concerning the migration as a global phenomenon.
Absolutely, this is very important what you say, because if the people arrive with pre-agreed and shared and safe and legal routes, the people will be screened also for the health side, you know. So we know who will arrive. Everything will be fast-tracked, you know. So instead than leave at the chance what is happening. So why, for example, there are no situation there, for example, in Libya, or now as we are trying to do, we signed a few days ago for the humanitarian corridor from Greece to Europe. So through humanitarian corridors, through visa, we can migration, as my colleague from Intersos say, cannot be stopped. Everybody migrates. It's some people we can migrate because we have the correct passport. We born in the lucky side, so lucky side of the world, and so it's very unfair. It's unethical. We call us Paladini della Giustizia with the European Union. We want we believe in ethical and moral values. So why we are doing this? we need a coordinated, shared plan for safe and legal routes, resettlement and relocation that are fluid, because this is not happening. People are stuck for years and their lives are, they see their lives passing by and they can do nothing. So it's our duty, because if we manage to do this, it's very hard, but we, as Mr. Lopez said before, we need to stop to use this difficult word. Let's go with simple word. So I will say the simple word: be honest and realistic. We need to be honest and realistic with ourselves and create safe and legal routes, so the people will not use the smugglers to come to Europe, will not pay the Russian roulette ticket to go in the desert, in this boat in the sea, because they will have the right to come with humanitarian visa, with the sponsorship visa, working visa, study visa. But this needs to happen, because it's not happening right now at the European level, not state level.
Legal entry, legal ways to entry. So, Apostola.
So first of all, we discussed a lot about safe and legal passage, but that's not always the case, and it cannot be the case for people who are looking for protection, because sometimes people I hear why why the Syrians or the Afghans, they don't go to the embassy to pick up a visa to come, etc. So I think that we need also to be careful that safe and legal passage is not for everybody, and I think for people who need protection, we need to ensure that people, wherever and however they come, they have the right to apply for asylum. I think something that can be done by Europe today is, first of all, to change the bad pictures of Moria 1, Moria 2, Moria 3, and Samos and all these camps. So for me, camps were not supposed to exist in Europe for that long period of time. Secondly, I think the number of people arriving in Europe today, it's such a small number that I think with the European real solidarity, the situation can be improving for those people, and this can be on benefit for both the European population and the same time for the refugees themselves. I think, of course, this justification that we don't do much things because we are afraid that more people will come, that's not the reality. I think the picture of 2015 will not going to be repeated. Europe in 2015 opened the gate itself and welcomed people, and Europe closed the door itself and is not welcoming any more people. Secondly, I think Europe has to not to spend the money to build up fences and fortresses and to invest on Frontex, etc. I think this money is being money thrown on air, and this is money of taxpayers. I think if you put money on the right direction, I think it's a benefit for everybody. Just to give you an example, we keep people for months and months and years, and they become vulnerable on the Greek islands. They become sick mentally and physically. And then because they are vulnerable, we take them to Europe. I don't think it's a valuable individual if the person is vulnerable itself or it's becoming handicapped in front of any situation. When today more than 30% of the population on the island are children, and those children, they never go to school, they don't learn anything except they see the mat and the tent. What will be their future in Europe? How Europe can benefit from that? So I think you need to be strategically also on so-called your investment, so the people also can be on your benefit, and of course you improve the life of people. Last but not the least, I think Europe, in addition to what can do in its own territory, needs to, of course, to continue its effort into other countries in order to improve the situation for the refugees that anyway they are spending most of their life in the neighboring countries. But something, and I close here, my grandmother used to say that if you have a problem, you need to solve it first of all yourself. Don't expect others to solve your problem. And I think Europe at the moment is thinking that Turkey, Libya, Morocco, and Niger, Ethiopia can solve the problem of Europe. No, that's not. The others cannot solve your problem. I think Europe needs to solve its own problem of existence. And I think at the moment, what we're talking about peanuts, and we're not talking about a crisis. It's crisis in their mind. It's a tsunami in a glass of water. So I think if we need to change that rhetoric, and I think European solidarity is there, and I do believe that we are more than the people who are against it. But I think we need to increase our voice and to shout loud, saying, not in our name, what's taking place today.
Many thanks. This is really a clear message. If the federalists would like to change the narrative, it's really clear now, and it's the right moment. The conference of on the future of Europe, it's the right moment for citizens also to raise their voice and be more clear concerning the need to have a different narrative. Paloma, your views, please.
Yes, no, just a second. I totally agree with my colleagues. I have to say that they have to put the focus in the relation that they propose the pact with third countries, because as like Apostolos said, it's not, you have to be sure, like European Union, who are your neighbor, and the relation that you have with your neighbors. No, we have seen the example in Ceuta 1 month ago. So I think that we can be sure that the deals and the agreements that the pact proposed to member states, they are dealing with the proper countries in order to put the focus on externalization and returns. No, we have to know we are the person who we make the agreement, and of course relocation, humanitarian visa, legal pathways. And I have to say that they have to stop the pushback in the European Union. Because if the first step is that we are doing pushback without law, I think that it could be the first point. And then, of course, the relation with third country, and we must to be sure that they are countries with respect human rights, and we are not in. They don't play in many cases with migrants like a coin. That happened in Ceuta 1 month ago. That was very, very terrible, and I have to say that the situation continues. So that's the reason we call all the time for agreement, for relocation, and for solidarity.
Well, I was in Ceuta years ago at the crisis of Perejil, and the situation, it was the same. So I will say that there is no improvement despite the effort. That's the main problem. But I would like now to open the floor for a few questions from the participants, if possible. We will have, if we have a few minutes more, no? Julia, please confirm it's possible?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. So who would like to take the floor now? Questions?
There is one in the chat from Elizabeth, who's asking Apostolos. She's saying that he mentioned the thousands of unaccompanied refugees children in Europe who are vulnerable to trafficking. Many go missing every day. What could the European solution look like that shares responsibility for this tragedy that is happening right now?
Just to clarify something that Interpol was talking about, 10,000 children missing, 18,000 children missing. Children, in reality, they are not missing in a sense. They are just disappearing and they are invisible, because nobody takes seriously and does not take the attention to that. Now, I can bring in front of you, and just replying on the solution, I can give you very beautiful examples from many centers in Greece that have been taking care of unaccompanied children. That sometimes when they even identify their mother and their father, they do not want to go to see their mother and father because they were seeing a family who was taking care of them on a part of, finding a place where they feel safe, where they can go to school, and they can see there is a future. So I think the solution at the moment is that among these thousands of children, and as I said, there are about 4,000 unaccompanied minors in Greece, it's taking them as being your child. So for people who have children, they know very well what the child needs. So if you provide to them the same attitude and the same approach, then those children, first of all, will stay wherever they feel that there is safety and there is future. And those children will be the future of Europe, and they can contribute to Europe itself. By putting them and keeping them in safe places, like many European countries, and I have to mention, Holland, Austria is giving money to Greece to keep the children here, and considering that, we're giving money to make the children better. No, I think responsibility is to share the burden, and sharing the burden, not just getting 3 of them and taking 2 children here and 5 children there. No, I think the children, they need a plan, because when we talk about the ages, 7 out of 10 are under 12 years old. So theoretically, we talk about very, very young children. So that's possible to work on that and to deal with the life of those children that could be tomorrow contributing quite a lot on our societies.
But we need to have a very strong sustainability in our protection system for children, guardianship, and all this, in particular for unaccompanied children. It's not a ping pong among countries that they will be the good solution for children. And they need to have a kind of stability, a follow up at all steps. So otherwise it will be a disaster for to have access to a continued education or find a job later on, and it's really so I don't know if someone would like to share, or if you would like to share your views concerning expectation for the conference on the future of Europe. It's a great opportunity for citizens, for NGOs to be very active and raise the voice and ask and pass a very strong message. It's the right moment now. It's a moment of election in several European countries, but the conference, it's the right framework to express clearly the views. And for us as a federalist, it's a great opportunity to develop more actions in particular in the area of migration for the next step. Apostole, starting from you this time again.
Yes, I can add one word. I think it is interesting, starting from Greece, where the government says that the biggest problem of the Greek community, the Greek population, is migration and refugees. So the question is that, hey, if you present migration as a problem, you need to explain also to the people why it's a problem. So even the 5 countries of the Med, where they talk about, the pressure they are receiving, versus the other European countries, it's a matter of how you are placing it in front of the discussion. I think the 2015 solidarity move from different European states to welcome 1 million people into European territory, it changed very quickly into a rhetoric that had to present, first of all, migrants as a danger, migrant as a threat, and at the same time, solidarity started to be criminalized. Individuals, NGOs, people who are assisting people at the shores and all this stuff. So I think the rhetoric that have been presented the last year is a rhetoric being negative for the solidarity. And I think the only thing that can keep Europe alive is solidarity among the states, solidarity among the individuals. I think what is an important thing to put on the discussion today in Europe is a real dialogue regarding what is migration in Europe today and what is the real impact. And I think if we want to see the numbers per year arriving in Europe and the pressure, it is something that is not a pressure as a reality. Yes, it could be for certain villages or certain places, the pressure is more, because sometimes they would tell you that in Samos, there are more people than the people of the island themselves. But the question is, why we need to put this parallelism on this part. So definitely, I would agree with you, Daphne, now that in the discussion we're having in Europe, I think we need to bring the issue on the table with the real facts, how much the people on the move arriving in Europe are having an impact on our societies, on the economy, or the threat to our society. So the question per se, needs to be presented also properly to people, because from one side, when they're talking as politicians that we need migrants because the society in Europe is getting old and we want these people to renew our societies. I don't think it is neither black or neither white. I think if Europe wants to invest, and I think Europe needs to invest on inequalities, because there are a lot of inequalities in Europe, because sometimes we feel this approach that, okay, Europe is taking care of refugees and it's not taking care of its own citizens that are facing inequalities. I think in addition to dealing with inequalities of its own citizens, Europe has the capacity at the moment to deal also with the lives of those people who are arriving in Europe and looking for protection. And I'm not saying that everybody coming to Europe is a refugee. But even for those people who are coming as economical migrants, I think it's important that there is a dignity and there is a proper process in place. I mean, day before yesterday, there were 24 people that came from Afghanistan and Syria. And the first they were taken directly to the asylum service. And the first question that they were asked is Turkey a safe country for you? So, I mean, they were not asked, first of all, to apply or why they are here. But the first question is if Turkey is a safe country for you. So I think definitely, I don't know why we're investing in such a, building a big wall. I mean, and considering everything as a negative for us. I don't know why we close our eyes in the front of reality. I don't see the reason behind that. I mean, if the fear is that, you know, everybody will come to Europe, I don't think everybody's coming to Europe. Even if they want to come to Europe, they cannot come to Europe. And I can tell even, and I believe that 2015 cannot be repeated. I have been in Turkey many times, and I'm talking to people who are refugees in Turkey, and they tell me, for example, that they don't leave the place because they don't have something to do in Europe. So if you are offering them something, they may come. And then you can include the process of any legal visas or any humanitarian visas in order to invest on the lives of the people, or the blue card that Europe was talking before. So definitely, I think the rhetoric needs to change. And I think we need to put more facts on that. And I don't think we need to convince any more politicians. The politicians, the ones who are talking negatively for migrants, are there. I think we need to talk to our citizens. We need to tell our citizens what reality is about. So because they are the ones who are voting, and they're the ones who are being threatened by the politician about, you know, these refugees who are going to take our lives and our jobs and our lives back. So I think it's important to start a campaign informing people about what is the reality and what are the numbers and what is the money being spent. Because also they need to know that with their own money are built up, 300 million euros are being spent on the Greek islands to build up these detention prisons. For what reasons, I don't know. To punish people for what? Punishing people because they made a mistake to come to Europe. So I think there are many points, but I think we need to bring a communication campaign in order to inform people properly. And I think if people are informed properly, they will take proper decision whenever it's needed.
I wish to add something because of what Apostolos just said is very important. The importance of communication, because most of the people, most of our fellow citizens in Italy, Spain, Greece, they don't know why all this money is spent to create this detention center and etc. And I would like to also spot a light on, you saw during the video there was a mention to Bangladesh. Bangladesh is quite, cannot be compared to Europe, you know. However, in 2017, there was a river of people that went to Bangladesh, from Myanmar to Bangladesh, the Rohingya people. And with those numbers, they didn't talk about invasion, they didn't talk about, the borders are still open. So sometimes I wonder why all of this communication about invasion, this is instrumentalized, you know. I think I will focus on some words that are for me, and I believe for all the panelists and you, Daphne, very important. That is saving lives. You cannot bargain, you cannot think. If there is someone that is dying in land or at the sea, need to be saved without any thoughts. Then safe and legal routes again, all the visa that we know and etc. Integration and inclusion, and focus on the good side, like people are resources that if they are coming in Europe and they are in Europe and they are seen, they don't live like ghosts, like the children that we're discussing about, they for sure will give back. So empowering them, seeing in them. And then, of course, the importance of know-how, but not only, because we have been seeing that there are many people that now coming from Africa, like there are the new people that are coming are the Bangladeshi. And why the Bangladeshi people live in Asia? They do not live in Africa. It's possible that nobody asks why the Bangladeshi are coming through the routes of the Mediterranean Sea through Libya. I do not want to open a Pandora box here, but this is a question that all of us, we need to ask ourselves. So probably, and we know that most of them, they are coming because for working purpose. So for sure, if they could have a working visa available in their own country, they will not take these dangerous routes just to come and work in Europe. So this is my conclusion and advice for the federalists.
Yes, you raise really a big problem, Regina, having in mind the pandemic now and the economic impact for the supply chains. All these people in Bangladesh and other neighboring countries, they have lost their job. So there will be an increase mobility of these people because there is no other solution. So we have to find different ways to deal with the problem, not stop people at the borders, in particular if we know that we have really economic activities that they need migrants. Paloma, I don't know if you have a few minutes, so if you would like to raise an additional point closing the webinar.
Yeah, no, nothing different that my colleagues. I have to say it's the same situation, for example, in Spain with people from Senegal, that they arrive, 1,000 of them to Canary Island. It's because of COVID. So perhaps nobody wants to leave their country. We have to put it in our mind that most of the people, they want to stay with their family and with their country because definitely life is not easy for them in Europe. But I have to say that now it's time to take actions to fight with COVID. No, we are dealing with the vaccination, so we improve in vaccination. But now I think that we have to deal with the consequence of COVID for migrants persons, and we have exactly the example in Senegal, because most of the people were living for tourists. So there was not very often that they came to Spain in a very dangerous route, like the Atlantic route. It's so dangerous. So most of the people died in that moment. It's the more dangerous in that moment. So I think that we have to put now the focus in deal with this special situation that has been grow with the COVID and the vulnerability that they have do it with people inside Europe, of course, like we talked about before, and of course in the third country that move people to cross the sea most of the cases.
So many thanks for all of you for your contribution, for your participation. And let me recall that the Conference on the Future of Europe is a great opportunity for citizens, NGO, to be very active, and for us as a federalist to be active and promote policies that on migration in particular and asylum, that it's really in line with our standards and values. And one last point before closing the webinar, there is a form just after the feedback form, it's put in the chat. I would like to ask you to fulfill